But if I was at the cemetery at night and I saw a bunch of cult members chasing me versus a vampire chasing me, it is still equally as terrifying. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the notoriously haunted Highgate Cemetery in London, England, which is rumored to be the home of a vampire. But before we get started, I'm Sophia Lovelace and I post videos about ghosts, ghouls, anything creepy and cool, so make sure to hit the subscribe button down below to be notified when I have new uploads. While you're down there, also make sure to hit the bell icon to be one of the first people notified when I have a new upload. Make sure you do that because it's free. So the thing about this graveyard is that it is in London, England, and it is one of the Magnificent 7 graveyards in London, which is a group of 7 graveyards that are interesting because they're architecturally interesting. Wow, that was not a very good use of adjectives right there. And it is one of the bigger graveyards in London, and London has a lot of big graveyards because it has a lot of people living in it, and of course that leads to a lot of people dying in it. Although it was constructed in 1839, you can still be buried in Highgate Cemetery. But according to the website, due to it being high in demand, you cannot purchase a plot of land unless you are above the age of 80 or are terminally ill. Now that being said, Highgate Cemetery is a very crowded cemetery, and there is plenty of people working on ways to manage all these bodies. There is plenty of people buried there, and there is also a fair amount of famous people buried there. Some notable people that are buried in Highgate Cemetery include the father of communism, Karl Marx, as well as Charles Dickens' wife, Catherine Dickens, and as well as theorist Herbert Spencer, who is famous for his ideas of social Darwinism. Upon doing my research about this cemetery, I discovered that Fantastic Beasts: Crimes of Grindelwald, which is the second movie in the series, had a few scenes filmed at Highgate Cemetery. Also, upon looking at images of Highgate Cemetery, I began to wonder if the movie Dorian Gray, which is based off of the novel A Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, was filmed there, because I remember seeing a scene where Dorian Gray is like walking through graves and it looked really familiar, and turns out when I looked it up, they did shoot a few scenes at Highgate Cemetery for that movie, which makes a lot of sense because a lot of the Gothic Victorian architecture definitely reflects some of the Gothic themes within that novel and within that movie. So this place is definitely not abandoned. You can still take tours at Highgate Cemetery. According to my research, it is split into 2 sections. You have the west section, which you can only access if you are on a tour, and that is where a lot of famous people are buried. That is where Karl Marx is buried. And then also a lot of architectural significance is in that section of the cemetery. And also, looking at the pictures, I think that Fantastic Beasts, where they filmed, was definitely on the west side of this cemetery. Now, on the east side of the cemetery, you can access without going on a tour. I don't know if you have to pay to get in or if it's just more open to the public, but that is the area that you can just wander around and take pictures, and you do not have to be on a tour. And apparently the east side is where, if you're from London, you usually go to that side because it's more chill, and the other side, the west side, is more touristy. Of course, I've never been there because I live in Canada and I can't just go on a 16-hour flight to go see a cemetery, even though I would want to. Is London 16 hours away? I think it's only 8. I have no idea. Now this brings us into the second topic of this video, which is, why is Highgate Cemetery so haunted? Now, if you've been a fan of the paranormal for a few years, or if you're interested in ghosts, you probably have heard this theory that graveyards are not haunted. Even though it seems like they would be, because there's a bunch of dead people around, but a lot of people theorize that that's not the case. And the reason that people theorize that graveyards are not that haunted is because we spend so little time at graveyards. And if someone is being buried there, they're not having memories of being buried. And think about it this way. If you were a ghost, would you choose to haunt a place that you may have never been before? Or would you choose to haunt a place that gives you a lot of joy, or you've spent a lot of time in? But one thing that I have always wondered about this theory is that when somebody is being buried in a graveyard, usually family and friends are around and they have strong negative emotions of sadness and of grief and of mourning. So wouldn't your strong feelings that you feel when somebody has passed away have some effect on the area around? So even though the person who is being buried might not have strong feelings about the situation, but there are so many people that are upset in that moment, and that happens repeatedly throughout the lifespan of a graveyard. Now, another thing to add on why the Highgate Cemetery is so haunted is because it was kind of a tourist attraction when it first opened up. The Highgate Cemetery was created in 1839, which is in the middle of the Victorian era. Now, the Victorians were obsessed with death. Now, there's a lot of theories about why this could be, why the Victorians were so obsessed with death. But one thing that we know for certain is that it definitely changed significantly how we view and approach death in the Western world. The Victorian era definitely saw a shift in the traditions that we practice surrounding death. For example, Victorians started funeral homes. They also started the idea of mourning and wearing black after someone passes away. Now, there are some traditions that we do not practice anymore, such as when somebody passes away within a home, the Victorians would cover mirrors because they believed that mirrors were portals to different dimensions. That is something that we do not practice anymore, but that is just an example of their elaborate tradition surrounding death. And in combination with having this new obsession with death, as well as having the elaborate architecture and design of Highgate Cemetery, this turned into a cool place to hang out. Well, hang out is maybe not a really good word for it, but like, you know, walking in the graves, having conversations, you know, discussing ideas. So having this atmosphere where people are opening up their mind and there's cultural shifts can definitely produce some energy. So that could be one of the reasons why Highgate Cemetery is one of the most haunted places in London. Now, the third reason that I hypothesize why Highgate Cemetery could be so haunted is because there is a significant amount of ideological theorists who are buried on the grounds of Highgate Cemetery. And some of these theorists have very controversial ideas. For example, Karl Marx is known as the father of communism. And if you know anything about communism, is that it is a very controversial subject. I have definitely seen how controversial and how heated some people's opinions about Karl Marx are, because I go to university, and if anyone has ever been to a university, you know there is the communism versus capitalism debate. And it is very heated, very complex, but it definitely brings up strong emotions in people. Another famous theorist that I mentioned was Herbert Spencer. Now, Herbert Spencer is known for his theory of social Darwinism, and very very, very short description of social Darwinism and his theories is that he believed that some cultures were more advanced than other cultures and that therefore some cultures were better than others. Now this theory of course led to a lot of people being mistreated and people having very, very strong opinions about this theory. And I theorize by having Karl Marx especially buried in Highgate Cemetery, that can cause a lot of extreme emotions for people visiting. Like I said before, communism is something that I've noticed that people aren't really neutral on. You either love communism or you hate communism. But either way, you're having strong emotions and reactions to it. So I think that those strong emotions emit energy and maybe the ghosts are using it to manifest. But anyways, there is a lot of energy within Highgate Cemetery for the 3 reasons I listed. Now we are moving on to the next part of this video, which is the story about the Highgate Cemetery Vampire. So like I said previously, Highgate Cemetery was created in 1839. However, during the 1960s, the cemetery was getting harder to keep up and maintenance was getting a lot harder because there's a lot of graves and some of the plants were starting to take over and effectively ruining some of the graves. So it started to look kind of how we picture Highgate Cemetery today, a little bit overgrown and a little bit overcrowded. And because of this, this is when the stories of the Highgate Cemetery Vampire started. So according to Discovery Channel, the Highgate Vampire craze happened between the years of 1967 and 1984, with almost hundreds of stories of people claiming to see a black shadow-like figure with red eyes. Now, some people claim just to see a black, tall figure, and then other people just claiming to see red eyes, and some people claiming to see both. Now, there is a few people that have claimed to be attacked by this vampire, but there is only one official report of a man who was walking by Highgate Cemetery when he was attacked by a vampire. Other factors that add to the vampire story is that police started finding dead animals around the cemetery that were drained of blood. Now, one thing I want to point out about this is that Highgate Cemetery has a long history of cult activity. Now, originally, a lot of people theorized that cults forming at Highgate Cemetery were just a rumor, and that eventually, because of this, cults started forming at Highgate Cemetery. So it is really unknown whether or not or how long cults have actually been in Highgate Cemetery. But if I was at the cemetery at night and I saw a bunch of cult members chasing me versus a vampire chasing me, it is still equally as terrifying. Another thing that people have claimed is that they have the feeling that they're being watched. Now this is interesting, especially when you consider that the cemetery is split between the west part of the cemetery and the east part of the cemetery. So even if you are on the east side of the cemetery, which is the area where there isn't tours and there's a lot less people, people claim to still have the feeling of being watched, which is interesting considering that there's less people, less tourists in that area. And that gets one to wonder, is that feeling from ghosts watching you, from vampires watching you, or is that from cult members watching you? Either way, they're all equally terrifying. Also, when I was thinking about doing a Highgate Cemetery video, I could have sworn that there was a story about a cemetery in London where there was a mausoleum with a bunch of coffins, and those coffins were said to move at night. And even there was a story of a homeless person who went into one of these mausoleums and he confirmed, or she confirmed, or they confirmed that yes, the coffins did move. Now, if you guys remember that story and know what I'm talking about, and maybe it's at a different graveyard or maybe it's like a different city, like in general, make sure to leave a comment down below. I would love to read what it is because I would love to do a video on it, but I guess it wasn't at the Highgate Cemetery because I could literally not find anything about that story. But if you know the story I'm talking about, please leave a comment down below. And also, I could have sworn that there was a famous picture of the Highgate Cemetery Vampire. It's kind of a blurry picture, which just kind of looks kind of like a shadow who's like standing above a grave, but I could not find that image anywhere. But if you guys are like know about that image, if you know where I can find that image, make sure to leave a comment down below. I would love to read that as well, because I would have loved to include it in this video because it's kind of spooky and kind of terrifying, but I could not find that image anywhere and it's kind of stressing me out. What are your opinions on Highgate Cemetery? Is there a vampire, or is it all just ghosts, or is it not haunted at all? Make sure to leave your thoughts down below in the comments. If you like this video, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below to be notified when I have new uploads. And when you're down there, make sure to hit the little bell icon to be one of the first people notified when I have a new upload. And thank you so much for watching, and bye!